The doll in her arms looked innocent, just an old porcelain toy worn by time, with painted blue eyes and a faded fabric dress. Its surface was chipped, its fabric thinned by years of touch. Nothing about it suggested importance. Nothing suggested danger. It looked like something left behind by a childhood that no longer existed, and yet, inside its hollow body, it carried a secret. Warsaw. Autumn 1943. By then, the ghetto was no longer a place of living, but of waiting. Waiting for hunger, waiting for fear, waiting for the knock at the door that could come at any moment. Streets emptied, buildings decayed. Silence became a warning rather than a comfort. The sound of boots on cobblestones was everywhere. German soldiers moved through the streets with purpose, searching homes, tearing apart rooms, forcing doors open. Even in the smallest apartments, no one ever truly felt hidden. Light entered without permission. Inside those rooms, life narrowed. One table, one window, one fragile routine. The doll rested wherever there was space, watching quietly as days repeated themselves. Dust floated in beams of daylight. Time passed slowly, painfully. Hands worked endlessly by candlelight. Sewing fabric meant for uniforms. Buttons were stitched. Tears were mended. The same hands that fed families now worked for the men who hunted them. The candle flickered, shadows stretching across cracked walls. Food grew smaller. Bread came in pieces meant to be shared, never enough. Empty plates stayed on tables longer than meals ever did. Hunger stopped being an emergency and became a condition of existence. Walls surrounded the ghetto, tall and unforgiving. Barbed wire crowned their edges. Watchtowers stood in the distance. Streets ended at checkpoints where movement slowed and choices were made without explanation. At some point, the doll revealed what it truly was. Its porcelain head twisted gently, releasing with a soft sound never heard before. Inside its body was empty space, carefully hidden, just large enough to hold folded papers wrapped in wax. Documents were prepared with precision, folded once, folded again, made small enough to disappear. Addresses, names, instructions. Lives reduced to paper thin enough to hide inside a child's toy. Small shoes crossed the streets at a steady pace. Worn leather against stone. A child moved through familiar paths, holding the doll close. She did not run. She did not stare. Just a girl with a doll. Nothing more. Soldiers stood at corners, smoking, watching. Trucks eventually arrived, engines echoing through narrow streets. Dust rose as vehicles stopped. Soldiers poured out, filling spaces that moments earlier had been empty. Doors were pounded from the outside. Wood shook in its frame. Shadows flickered beneath doorways. Inside, breath was held. Fear no longer whispered. It announced itself. People were forced into lines. Backs hunched, heads lowered. German soldiers stood ahead as silhouettes, checking papers, redirecting lives with gestures rather than words. The doll was held tighter now, porcelain pressed against fabric, arms wrapped protectively around something fragile. Its cracked face stared outward, unchanged, unreadable. A black leather glove entered the frame, slow, deliberate. The hand reached forward, testing authority without haste. The doll was taken and examined carefully, turned from side to side, judged in silence. Time stretched thin. The street seemed to disappear. Then, without explanation, the doll was returned. A gesture, a command. Go. Night fell again over the ghetto. In hidden rooms, papers were unfolded. Wax was peeled back. Candlelight revealed maps and lists spread across rough wooden tables. Shadows moved as plans were memorized and destroyed. The doll rested once more, unchanged on the outside. Morning light passed across it gently, as if nothing had happened. Below ground, figures gathered in silence beneath a single hanging bulb. Faces remained unseen. Only movement and intent filled the space. In the distance, smoke rose into the night sky. Buildings burned. Light flickered against rooftops. History moved closer. Years later, that same doll would rest behind glass, illuminated by a careful light. Reflections of visitors passed across its cracked porcelain face, blurring past and present. The ghetto had been a place of compression, courtyards filled with laundry and shadow, empty bowls left on tables, shoes placed neatly beside beds, life reduced to objects and routines. Once, long ago, hands had passed the doll gently from one person to another, a gift meant to comfort, a promise not fully understood. Our child slept lightly beneath a worn blanket. Morning arrived too soon, it always did. Meetings happened quietly in alleys and narrow spaces. Words were few. Trust was everything. A door opened toward danger. A small figure stepped forward. Feet moved toward barriers built for adults. Documents were checked by gloved hands, stamped with mechanical precision, returned without interest. Elsewhere, trembling fingers accepted folded papers. No celebration followed, only relief. The same streets were walked again and again. Morning, afternoon, dusk. The doll was always there, on tables, in arms, beside beds. Then the trucks returned and did not leave. Streets were blocked. Crowds moved together under orders. Authority made itself known, boots, uniforms, silence. The doll was held tighter than ever, arms wrapped protectively around what mattered most. Paths divided. One direction led back to buildings. Another led toward vehicles waiting with engines running. A small figure walked away, tired, alive. A door handle turned. Warm light spilled into darkness. Winter arrived. Snow fell quietly onto streets already worn by fear. One final map lay open on a table, its markings precise, its meaning heavy. Preparation gave way to history. Today, people walk through museum halls and see a porcelain doll behind glass. Most see an object, a relic. Few understand what it once carried. Inside that doll, 89 lives were saved. Sometimes history is not changed by armies or weapons. Sometimes it is changed by what a child carries in her arms.